Good Woch, welcome to tonight's Shir. Motzei Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh. Tonight's Shir is dedicated by Rabbi Pinchas, I think it's actually Pinchas Yaakov, Rabin, in memory of his late brother, Chaim Shmuel Mendel ben Moshe Alav Shalom, otherwise known as Michael. And we wish Pinchas long life, good health, along with all the family, and may the wonderful memories of his late brother be an inspiration for all the family and a bracha for all the family. I'm going to start off with some feedback from last week's shir. Number one, we had a discussion about money, dollars or coins received from the Rebbe, and whether making them into jewelry makes a difference. Does laminating a dollar bill does that make a difference? So that was last week's discussion. So I had a couple of people pointed this out to me. I'm going to share with you, and I want to just share with you, it's good to know where to find things. So there is an app called Rebbe Responsa, which you can see on the screen. They have curated some 5,000 letters of the Rebbe, which were originally written in English. They're not translations. They were written and sent off in English. And a couple of people brought to my attention the following letter. So it's a letter, as you can see, written to a Miss Malka Friedman. The date is Tov Shin Lamed Hey, and it's the time when the Rebbe had launched the Mivtza Ne'ez Shabbos Kodesh, Mivtza Neshek, and it looks like the Rebbe had offered an incentive that whoever commits herself to light Shabbos, a candle for each Erev Shabbos, we'd send $1 or a coin. And this Miss Malka Friedman looks like she asked the Rebbe, inquiring the significance of the dollar bill in connection with the candle lighting campaign. What follows is a fascinating two-page letter, two full pages in English. The PS is on the third page, and the Rebbe talks about mitzvahs bechlal and about, and then he goes on to the particular mitzvah of hadlokas neiros, and at the end, so and the union of tzedakah associated with hadlokas neiros. That's the whole arichnas of the letter. All as I say in English, and you can look up the original on that app. Meanwhile, the PS is in connection with the above, says the Rebbe. I want to emphasize a very important point, namely that however important that dime or dollar bill is, it is still muksa and not to be touched on Shabbos and Yom Tov like any other money. So a very clear answer, position of the Rebbe, that he gives $1, that dollar remains muksa. That doesn't take away from when it's been modified through made into a piece of jewelry. I don't think that's the issue here. It's as it is, the simple halacha is that it's muksa. Now, it's very interesting because one of our regular listeners wrote to me that he was years ago as a bocher in yeshiva, and the mashpia said Rebbe's dollar is not muksa, and it's like, how it's kind of levels of chassidishkeit. How can you say a Rebbe's dollar is muksa? Yeah, muksa is the. But then you can say, no, the Rebbe gave you $1 because he wants to, like dir bedachtonim, he wants $1, not to be something oisveld. It's $1, which is so. All right. Anyway, however your chassidishkeit goes one way or the other, but here you have a clear answer from the Rebbe that the dollar as it is going to be muksa. If you modify it through plastication or laminate, whatever it may be, there's room to discuss that. The Rebbe is sort of talking simply, should we say, face value. Let's go on to the second point, which we discussed last week, and we're talking about the Rebbe's Loshen. I threw in a comment, and I'm very grateful for at least 4 or 5 people came back with sources about this and discussion. I mentioned how the Rebbe talks about Lamata Me'asarat Fochim, and how we have this Gemara in Sukkah Daf Daled Amud Beis and Daf Hey Amud Aleph, talking about the Shechina Me'yolam. What's the lashon here again? Me'yolam layorda Shechina Lamata Me'asarat Fochim. That was the lashon which we had here. And my discussion last week was where Tosfos says that the wall of for 10 Tefachim or for Shabbos is also derived from this Oren v'Kapoires, and my question was, but the Oren and the Kapoires are inside the Kodesh Kodashim, which is in any case Rosh Hashanah. Before going further, I just want to share with you an interesting thought. Last week, the quote from the Alter Rebbe Siddur was the idea of Rishus Hayar, the Ein Rishus Harabim Lemala Me'asor. Above 10 Tefachim, there's no issue of Rishus Harabim. Just bring that down. So I'm just mulling in my mind. We've got 2 dinim of 10 Tefachim. We have the din of Ein Rishus Harabim Lemala Me'asor Tefachim. We have a separate din that in order to establish a Rishus HaYochid, it has to have mechitzis, it has to have walls around it, which are 10 Tefachim high. Are those 2 dinim, are they interdependent? I never thought about it till this past week. But there seems to be a logic here that the walls of the Rishus HaYochid are to ward off the Rishus HaRabim. And since Rishus HaRabim is Oile Ad Asara, so in order to establish Rishus HaYochid, you need to have walls of Asarat Tefachim. I see a certain logic there, although they are ostensibly, you could say they're separate dinim, but I believe they are connected, which fits very well in our discussion. So now let's move on to the feedback. So, as I said many, many times, the Rebbe spoke about the Geula Lamato Me'asarat Tefachim, and I asked, what's the significance of that? So several people pointed out to me, including the Chosn, has to have special mention. So in Tovshin Lamed Zayin, in Yud Shvat, at the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe addressed several questions which are put to him personally. One was the one before this is about why does the Rebbe often say v'chuli, v'chuli, and he talks about styles of people speaking, of Rabbeim speaking. For example, I think he mentions there the Mittel Rebbe has a style of Vidal, Vidal Mevin. Every second paragraph finishes off with Vidal. Anyway, so behemshich to this, the Rebbe talks about his usage of the term of Lamato Me'asarat Tefachim. So I'm just going to read a little bit from this Sikha, as they say, it's Yud Shvat Tovshin Lamed Zayin Motzei Shabbos. So the Rebbe connects this with, we have a Gemara which says Kolu Kol HaKitzin, all the dates for when the Geula was predicted to come, they've all come and gone. So what we're waiting for? So the Gemara says we're for tshuva. So what is basically being said? That the Geula is already here, but it's in a higher level, and it has to come. It's been delivered, but l'mala ma'asarat tefachim. It's not in a tangible way. What we were looking for is that the Geula should be in a tangible way. Let's read further. Then the Rebbe refers to the Gemara in Shabbos that above 10 Tefachim is not called Rishus HaRabim. The concept of Rishus HaRabim is only within the lowest 10 Tefachim. Says the Arizal. Now he's different to that word which we had before from the Siddur, that the Rishus HaRabim is Alma Dipruda, a world of division. Rishus HaYochid is the focus on Olam Atzilus and a world of Achdus, and because it's connected to the Eibishter who is one. And the Rebbe finishes off, had I not added those words, Lamata, the Geula should be Lamata Me'asorat Tvachim. So you could say, yeah, the Geula's been is here already. But it's in a spiritual sense, it's Lamala Me'asorat Tvachim. The Gemara says, Kol Kol HaKitzin. Therefore, the Rebbe is saying, therefore I need to emphasize that I'm not satisfied with the Geula, which is Lamala Me'asorat Tvachim. Because the Gemara says it's already been there. Navos, I want to see the Geula Lamata Me'asorat Tvachim, and he quotes the famous conversation of the Rebbe Marash with the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek. That the Tzemach Tzedek, that Tofresh Ches was purported to be a year of the Geula, Mashiach to come. So at the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, whatever, the Rebbe Marash asks his father, what happened? So the Tzemach Tzedek said, it was printed in Likutei Torah. So to which the Rebbe Marash said, okay. Someone is pointing out perhaps the Mashpia felt that the Rebbe's words only applied to a dollar which had lost its value, money value, having been exchanged for its stock or given instead. I don't know. Could be. Upon him, Kipshute is, as mentioned last week, what's there's no real need for a person to move a Rebbe's dollar on Shabbos. Right, it's kvoid wherever you have in a safe place, and in a weekday you metaltal it as much as you need. Okay, the other point is, and this is fascinating, that as I started with this Gemara, which says that me'olam lo yordo shchino lamato lo olu Moshe ve'Eliyahu lamor. So there's this divide that the Shekhinah doesn't come within the 10 tefachim of the ground, and Moshe didn't go up. Now we've got the famous Medrash. Everyone has learned a bit of Chassidus, even just learned Sichos. So you know that there's a whole moshul of Malchus Roimi and Malchus Surya, and there was a divide between these countries, and they're not allowed to cross the border. And then came a time when they took away the border controls, and they allowed that Elyonim Yeru Tachtoinim, Tachtoinu Yalu Elyonim Roimi. And the way I saw once in the Maimer, Roimi means like Roim high, and Surya means rancid, bad smell. So there's the Roimi and the Surya, there's the Elyonim and the Tachtoinim. And until Matan Torah, there was a divide between Elyonim and Tachtoinim. After Matan Torah, so then at Matan Torah, Vayed, when the Hashem says, Avani Amaskil, I will start. Vayed Hashem al Har Sinai. The Shekhinah comes Lamato, and Moshe al Amorim. So how does that match with this Gemara that Lo Yordo Shekhinah Lamato, V'Lo Yolam Moshe al Yol Amorim? Yeah, so this is a glaring question, and this has not come through on the copy which you have on, but in several sources. A couple of people sent me that in the Rebbe Rashab has a mimer about Matan Torah, and towards the end he brings this. And this is in Sefer Mamorim Tofresh Mem Gimel Omed Pei Beis. Talks about this. It's also in Tofresh Mem Daled, and my son-in-law in Chicago sent me the reference to Tofresh Mem Gimel, but also in the Ragat Shover. In the Ragat Shover al HaTorah, Tzofes Panech al HaTorah, so he has a in volume on Devorim, he has a whole study, he has a ha'oros on the Moreh Nevuchim. In those ha'oros, there is a mention, the Ragat Shover mentions the Shita of Rabbi Yossi, and he says, but Mash'enkin L'didam, we don't paskin that way. In other words, this view of Rabbi Yossi is not unanimous, and it looks like that the Medrash, which was mentioned before, it disagrees with Rabbi Yossi. And in the Maimah of Tofresh Mem Gimel, the Rebbe Rashab seeks to reconcile between the two sources. But Bepashtus, this idea, Le'olam Le'yordo Shchino, Le'yordo Shechina Lemato, that's not necessarily the broad consensus amongst the Chazal. It looks like other sources say it differently. He says this. The Rebbe Rashab tries to explain it. Okay, let's now move on to something Lemata me'asorat tvachim. So, actually, when I was in the summer, I was by my son in Wyoming, and I saw they get these frozen balls of dough. And you take 15 of those balls, you put them into a wet baking tin, leave them to thaw, and then they kind of rise, and then they blend, and then it looks like, and it tastes like a very good challah. Very, very good. So now another shliach somewhere who also uses these frozen balls of dough. You can America, perhaps in England also you can buy them, but in America, in the small places, they as far as kashrus is concerned, they're perfectly okay. And here's the question of so they are asking, do they have to take challah? So now a dough, which is actually, you can see this on the screen, and you go to Desim Mashiach Lamed. If a goy makes a dough, or he owns a dough, and if there's a Jewish baker working for a goyish proprietor, and if it's the ownership of the goy, it's potur of challah. And the other way around, if it's a Jew's dough, even if it's actually the work was done by a goy, it is chayav b'challah. So it's got to do with ownership. So then, therefore, a pashtus, there's no question of a chayav challah. Now, I'm presuming that the balls of dough were in the factory, were made into one massive mass of dough and then broken down into smaller balls and then frozen and packed, etc. So there was a dough made by a goy. At that moment, it's potter min challah, and therefore it's not going to come back into a chayav challah at all. There's a hypothetical question in my mind. What would happen if a goy made small amounts of dough, let's say made just 1 kilo? The original batch was just 1 kilo. And then a Yid came and took those small batches of dough and then made them into a large batch, where you can argue, well, it was never potter min challah, because you have a discussion in the Mishnah. Let's say if a dough was, well, let's talk about grain. There's a certain stage, miruach, where grain is chayv b'maisos, etc. If that maturation happened in the possession of a goy, then there's no chayav challah or no chayav of maiser. But if it was small pieces, so there was no maturation for the mitzvah of challah. Therefore, if that maturation is done in the hands of a yid, actually there is a chayav challah. Anyway, but that's, I say, clearly hypothetical, because I'm sure that the factory which makes these balls of dough make them into in a large batch. And therefore, there is a status of a dough which is chayav b'chal and it's potter because it's owned by a goy, and therefore that's not going to be resurrected at a later stage. Before I forget, I want to also go one point which was discussed in previous shiur or two shiurim ago, and that was about saying brachas with the little children who aren't clean. And I mentioned about the kedusha of a bracha, and if there's no, now I apologize for the distress that some dedicated nursery teachers had from this position, and it is felt in that field of education that you do need to teach children even at a very early age. What I just would like to then, if you want to call it, backtrack and say that usually, and I asked, usually the children, once they're toddlers, most of the time they are clean. And so then that's not a problem. It's talking about when we know that the child isn't clean, then it wouldn't be appropriate. But if Bapashtas, most of the time they are clean. Occasionally, okay, they need to be changed. Okay, so then one would be able to teach them brachas, unless you know that that they're not clean, which probably in any case you'd change them before going to the next thing. Okay, let's move on now. Common question about a woman wants to be able to, whether to go to shul Shabbos morning or she wants to do other activities, and she wants to employ a babysitter. So there's a question of paying the babysitter, and that is called schar Shabbos. So if it would be a non-Jewish babysitter, there's no problem to employ a goy on Shabbos. There would be a problem of paying them on Shabbos, to leave an envelope for the guy to take before they leave. You have a waitress, and to leave an envelope on Friday night, they should take it before they go. That is a problem because you're paying on Shabbos. But we're talking about here, talking about whether they can earn money. A guy can earn money on Shabbos. A Jew mustn't earn money on Shabbos. The simple solution is have law where there's a package deal. The person supplies their services in a package, which include Shabbos and weekday, and you pay for the package. That doesn't always work. And let's say, in this case, this babysitter is not available and not needed during the week, just on Shabbos morning. So Havlaw isn't a solution. So how can we get around it? So on the phone, I'd said two solutions. One is to give the money not as there's not a set charge, not a set fee. It's given more as a tip. And because it's more on a casual basis, so then that would be okay. The other thing I said was that you can give the babysitter before Shabbos, give her $20, whatever it may be, and you give it, I'm giving this money as a loan. Then after Shabbos, you say, no, that loan, forget it, don't worry about it. So she's not earning money, but the loan is being waived because of her rendering services on Shabbos. So having said that, I looked further, and Baruch Hashem, we have this shir, and it gives me the urge to look things up and before sharing it with the tzibur. So now in the Piskei Teshuvos, he actually quotes this heter of waiving a debt, and he says that although the Tehillah LeDavid was a Rav in Barditchev about, I don't know, 120 years ago, he allows that, but other poskim, including Reb Shlomo Zalman, Auerbach, do not subscribe to that. And they say that having your debts waived is another way of actually earning money, and that's not okay. It's still called schar Shabbos. So that avenue is not available, according to many contemporary poskim. So then we've only got the other option, and that is of giving it as a tip, without, if it's someone who's no relationship to you, just coming in, so then that's also going to be a bit of a sham. If it's someone like a close family member, a niece, a sister-in-law, whatever it may be, who would do it as a favor also. Perhaps not every Shabbos, but they would do it as a favor occasionally. And therefore, if they do it now and you give them a tip, that would be legitimate. Okay, that's as much as I can say about that. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so here we have a game called Sudoku. Is it Japanese or something? Anyway, usually it comes that you get a printed square, which has got two numbers in various positions, and somehow you have to use your keppel to work out how you can make with the other 7 digits between 1 and 9, how they should equal the same number horizontally and vertically. I'm one of the poorest experts in Sudoku. I don't know. I never really, when I was, I must tell you a story. The Alter Rebbe, when the Mizritcher Maggid needed to have a Baal Tekeya, so he asked which of the Talmidim is offering to, he wants to, and whoever he wants to teach them how to be a Baal Tekeya. So the Alter Rebbe offered his services, and then the Maggid teaches him all the kavonas of Tkiyas Shofar. At the end of having taught all the kavonas, so the Alter Rebbe says, "But I don't know how to blow shofar. Weil ich bin keinmal kein Engel nicht gewesen. I never got the kind of kid who took a shofar and started playing around. So I never learned how to blow shofar." The Maggid says, was, what did you do? You misled me. So he says the whole story with Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu, after all the Giluim, she says that Eibishter, well, I can't speak in public. At any rate, so when I was the Ingela, Sudoku wasn't around. So Bamela, that's my apology for not knowing. Kol Ponim, so you have this game, and it's, instead of having printed text, you have here tiles. And you have here, as you can see, a booklet with 100 puzzles. And you're going to take one page, and you're going to take the prescribed numbers, 2 numbers from the book. You'll put them in place, and then you'll sit down and work out your puzzles. You put all the tiles in place. So the question is, can you do this on Shabbos? So now you can ask the same question: can you play Scrabble? The difference is that Scrabble is usually you have right scores, because there's different values of whereabout on the board you can manage to create a word, how big a word, and usually Scrabble, I believe, also you play with another person, and therefore there's scores. And there's a kind of game which involves writing down scores. It shouldn't be played on Shabbos. Sudoku, I understand you play on your own, not with someone else. I might be totally off on that one, but I don't know if it's a minute to write down anything, scores. If it does involve writing scores, that is a problem, but otherwise, is filling in the squares with these tiles, is that called writing? So here we have from Shmiras Shabbos Kehilchoso. He's got a whole chapter on games, and he says that if it's putting stuff, like let's say a jigsaw puzzle. So if you have if it's just loose pieces, they don't stick together, then such a puzzle may be played with on Shabbos. You tip it over, the whole thing falls out. That's not a problem. Then you have these adult child jigsaw puzzles, the ones with 1,000 pieces, and you spend 10 hours putting it together, and then you hang it up in the wall. At any rate, those serious games, so those puzzles, you shouldn't be allowed, you're not allowed to play with them on Shabbos, because the pieces stick together. So basically, the concept of writing or drawing is an image which is being formed, where you got letters stuck into a surface, or in the case of the jigsaw, you're creating an image with pieces stuck together. When they're just loose, you can tip it out, and the whole lot falls out. Then that is not a problem of ksiva, and therefore that's permitted. I'm just going to look at the chat here. I see 2 people have. Someone's asking, could you ask the babysitter to prepare stories? That's an interesting question. Yes, could be. I mean, if, let's say, like a Baal Koire is paid for his time for preparing. So if the babysitter is, depending on the age of the children, if it's the kind of thing which they do need to prepare something, that would be okay. Someone's asking whether the boirer would be a problem. No, boirer is not a problem, because it's not for delayed use. It's you're taking a piece which you want to use now. So that's okay. That's not a problem of boirer. Now, I just want to, before going off to the next thing, and that is a ha'ora, which I may have said before, but not everyone who's here now was in previous time. And that is that we say in benching, let's say Hashem Elokeinu, let's say Hashem Elokeinu, B'yom HaShabbos hazeh. Now, In the Nusach Rambam, it's B'Yom HaMonoyach Hazeh. The Arizal took exception to the Lashon of B'Yom HaMonoyach Hazeh, and he is so strident about that. He uses the word, that term, Manoyach HaMa'oretz Hoya, the father of Shimshon. Was the Gemara says he was a HaMa'oretz, not going to the detail of why, but and he says you use the language of B'Yom HaMonoyach Hazeh, so it's an ignorant type of expression. Very, very strange. So one of the suggestions to say is the following. That Shabbos is a day of devotion to Hashem, Shabbos Hashem. And Shabbos is a day where you have a day off. You work slogging a whole week, you're working so hard. Comes to Shabbos, you relax. So if Shabbos is just a day of relaxation, that's a Mahoret Hoya. It's true, but it's not what Shabbos is about. Shabbos is you have menucha from the physical, then you can focus on the spiritual. So one could suggest that that's what the Arizal is saying. Focus on Shabbos Hashem rather than on the Yom Menucha saying. Let's move on. Right. So someone asks me, number 6 is, so this is number 7 on the screen, but number 6, about opening and closing Pampers before Shabbos. Now, just for those who are not familiar, Pampers are disposable nappies in English, and they have tabs. Well, there was a stage when they have tabs, and those tabs have got sticky surface, and you wrap the nappy, the diaper around the child, and you stick the tabs in place, and then when you want to teach the child to say a bracha, so you unstick them and you take off the tabs, and so now some contemporary poskim advise that the pamper, these tabs have to be disconnected, opened up before Shabbos, and then stuck in place, and then you can use them on Shabbos. So this is I can imagine another thing to do for a young mother. The Erev Shabbos, she has to take a bunch of diapers and unstick and stick, and therefore begs the question, what's all of this about? So the background to this is that sticking is a tool of sewing. One of the Lamatas Malachos is toifer, sewing. What about a temporary stitching? Some which was sewn only for short term. And the precedent of this is that before shoe boxes were invented, a shoemaker made a pair of shoes and he sewed the two shoes together. And so I bought myself a new pair of shoes, and Shabbos morning I want to go to shul, and if the two shoes are stuck to one another, it's not so convenient to get to shul that way. And so I want to separate them. Now that stitching of the two shoes together was obviously for a short term, and therefore, so Rabbeinu Yoel, one of the later Rishonim, says you're allowed to do so, but you shouldn't do it in front of Am Ha'aretz, because they won't know the difference between one unstitching and another unstitching. But that's the way it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, that you're allowed to unstitch a temporary adhesion. How long is called a temporary? So I talked about a cobbler making a pair of shoes. You could say, who says a cobbler made the pair of shoes? Perhaps it means he took them in for repairs for a short term. It's not so clear. So the advice to open and close those tabs or the tampers is that instead of it being a long-term adhesion, it should be it's by having opened it before Shabbos, it's only a short-term adhesion. Therefore, it's less of a problem to open them up on Shabbos, to use them on Shabbos. That's the background to it. In the notes, if you have the sheet, you can see a reference to the Sefer Shabbos Kahalocha from Rav Forkash. He discusses this in his 4th volume. I don't have a picture of it because it's not Otzar Chochmah. And there he discusses this as a hidur, as a chumrah. And in the notes he says actually that Reb Shlomo Zalman himself, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, to members of his family and had told them it's not really necessary. So there is, whilst there is some value in doing so. If you've been doing so till now, fine. But you have to have the Hatash Nadorim to stop doing so. But if you're finding it difficult to not mechuyev to take on this chumrah. Let's move on. So this is a question someone asked me. She goes out of the house and left a non-Jewish babysitter. She didn't ask me about leaving a child with a non-Jewish babysitter. That was a separate question. But meanwhile, she's asking about the bottle of milk in the fridge. So we're looking here in Shulchan Aruch, as you can see, in Siman Kuf Yud Ches. And it says the following: one who leaves now there's a difference. We know about the idea of sending food with a goy. So you would need to have seals, etc. That's common knowledge. What about when you go out of the house and you leave a goy in your house? And so it says here Shulchan Aruch, and the same as Siman after Bosash and Salmon Ayin, etc. So he says, if you have stuff in your house, foods, Dvorim, that if they had been exchanged for something else, there would be Isur Torah. So let's say a piece of meat or something. So if you're going in and out and you didn't say that you're leaving, whatever, for a long time, then you don't have to worry. Even if there were maybe benefit for them in changing it. But if you said, I'm going for a while, then it's us. But if there's no benefit from the exchange, mutar b'chol in. If the goy would not benefit from exchanging that food for another food, for a treifa food of the equivalent, there's no, it's not a problem. What does he gain? Switching this for that. There's a bottle of milk. Well, he emptied it and used the kosher milk, and then refilled it with non-kosher milk. Now, there's a couple of points here. First of all, that the opening of this halach in Shulchan Aruch is if the exchange is something which is Isur Torah. Milk is not an Isur Torah. Goyish milk is not an Isur Torah. It's Isur D'Rabbanan. Of course, the concerns because it might be from an unkosher species, but the actual Isur of Cholav Akum is definitely Isur D'Rabbanan. And at the end of the Shulchan Aruch says, end of the Sif says, that if there's no benefit, mutar b'chol inyan. Now, this last phrase, mutar b'chol inyan, leaves a little bit of ambiguity. Does it mean it's mutar b'diavad or even lechatchila? So I have a sefer called Chelkas Binyamin on this point he mulls over whether it's lechatchila or b'diavad. So I'm not totally sure. There's certainly room to be makel because I said it's not Isur Torah, talking about the Rabbanon, and there's a possibility of saying that it's even mutar lechatchila. You can take it that way. Is there room to be machmir possibly? I'm not so comfortable. There's one situation where you leave a guy in your house to clean the floors. They have no business going into the fridge. So then you come back, see everything, the fridge is exactly the way you left it. I have no problem with that. But in the case of a babysitter, and you want them to give the child breakfast or something, or they want to have their own, make themselves a coffee, you told them use this cup, not those cups, fine. But the bottle of milk is not going to be the way you left it. So if it's stuff which you're leaving in their care and it's not going to be the way you left it, there's no how do you say, tevias ayin. I'm more anxious about leaving them to, unless there's a case of yotze v'nichnas where you come in any time, then that itself is a disincentive for any misconduct. Okay, so now we're going on to the question number 8 about interrupting between Shal Yad and Shal Rosh to say Moedim Anachnu Loch. So someone sent me a contradiction. There is at the back of the Siddur of many Kahos Siddurim, both Israeli and American, there's a table of where you are in davening and what you want to interrupt to say. So that was compiled by the late Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Edelman. Then there's someone later, that's already probably been already 30 years already, even more. Then comes along someone, a Talmud Chochem, by the name of Rabbi Yoel Lemberg, and he published a sefer called also Lubavitcher, called Hefsek B'Tfilah, and he's published it a couple of times. In his later edition, he discusses this. Then you have a sefer, which this is the person who asked me the question. There's a sefer called Shevach Yokor, however you pronounce it. So that's Reb Shmuel Horowitz, who is more known for his volume Shevach HaMoyadim, and he's published a couple of other. He's a son of the late Reb Chaim Tashkenta, so Shmuel ben Chaim is Shevach. So in his earlier editions, he had written that between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, you can be mafsik to say Moedim and Achnu Loch. But in his later editions, he says you should not be mafsik. So there's been some development over here. And I just want to go through what's happened over here. So now, in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, Siman Chof Hei, he says you should not interrupt between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh to answer what's called Dover Shebekdusha, Omen Shmei Rabba, etc. In the Siddur, he says you should interrupt to answer. So that which we're going to read from the Siddur. Yeah, this is from the Hilchos Tefillin in the Siddur. Afal Pikein, although you're not meant to interrupt Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, if you heard Kaddish or Baruch Hu, Kedusha between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, you are allowed to be mafsik, to answer them. Afal Pi, that's Goyrim Brocha Acheres Al Shel Rosh. If you interrupt between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, you're going to have to make a new brocha on putting on the Shel Rosh. No, never mind. The Fisher Yesh Oimrim Shemvorchem LaOilam Al Shel Rosh Al Mitzvahs Tefillin. After Loisdorf Min Time, Minig Ashkenaz is always to say Al Mitzvahs Tefillin. So you're saying, oh, you interrupted, you have to now make another bracha. You know what? There are plenty of fine Yidden who say every day a second bracha. Well, it's not so terrible that I'm causing myself to make another bracha. We don't say a second bracha on the Shel Rosh because Sofek bracha is lahakel. But here, when it comes to causing what's called not a bracha levatola, but a bracha she'einot tzricha, you can rely on that opinion that you always should be saying al mitzvahs tefillin and sheloi livotel me'aniyas dover shebekdusha, not to have to drop in answering dover shebekdusha. Dover shebekdusha is typically those things which are said only with a minyan, as in Kaddish, Baruch Hu, Kedusha. So you clearly here, the Alter Rebbe enumerates three things as Dover Shebekdusha, Kaddish, answering Baruch Hu, answering Kedusha. He does not mention Moedim. Now, later on in this Hilchos Tefillin, the last few bits are more related to Krishma, and there the Alter Rebbe says that if you are in middle of Birchas Krishma, let's say you are by Yotzer Oyer, by Hameir La'oretz, whatever, in middle of Avos Olam, you should be mafsik to answer Kaddish. That's just the two parts of Kaddish, Omen Shmei Rabba and Omen of Damir Be'olma. You should be mafsik to answer Baruch Hu. You should be mafsik to answer Kedusha, not the full Kedusha, but just the three psukim of Kaddish, Baruch, and Yimloch. That's a Kiddush. He says Yimloch is also part of Kedusha. And then he says you should also answer Moedim Anachnu Loch, just the three words. So in the context of responding during Birchas Krishma, Moedim Anachnu Loch has been given equal footing to Dover Shebekdusha. That's to interrupt in middle of Birchas Krishma. Here we're talking about interrupting between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, which is going to cause that you have to make another bracha on the Shel Rosh. Now, you can take it either way, and that is where the earlier, writers, like the Shevach Yokor in his earlier position, was saying, well, since in the context in Siman Samach Bo, in the dinim of Hefsek in the middle of Birchas Krishma, Moed Menachnu Loch is given equal footing to Medova Shebekdusha, therefore the same as regards between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh. The later position is saying no. And what you have on the screen, we're just going to have a quote from the Sefer Hefsek B'Tfilah. Now, I've written here, it's from the Tovshin Samach Tes edition, because in the earlier edition, which I have, it doesn't talk about this. But in his later edition, Rabbi Lemberg writes that the fact that the Alter Rebbe does not mention Moedim, whereas later on he does mention, he puts Moedim together with Kedusha and Baruch Hu. So that seems to tell us that no, between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, you don't answer Moedim Menachnu Loch. No, it's by the way, why are you putting up tefillin just in the middle of Chazor Hashan? So at that point, well, never mind. But it's not such a common thing, at least for people who try to come to a minyan on time. So yeah, so the point being said here is that although elsewhere Moedim Menachnu Loch does have the same value, but in here we don't have a source for that. And going back, Be'emes in Shulchan Aruch says you shouldn't interrupt at all. Here the Siddur is a chiddush, you should interrupt for davar shebekdusha. Ve'en lecha b'yosem chiddush. Right, and let's see a couple of points. Minhag Sfard also to bench on Shel Rosh. Okay, you might be right. It's a machlokas between in Rashi and Tosfos, I believe. I didn't know that the Sfardim also say a bracha on the Shel Rosh. It may be also amongst the Sfardim there'll be different communities, which way they follow. Okay, thank you. Then. Right. I recently wrote a letter of recommendation about a particular Rav that I wrote that he's Boki also in Minhag Sfardim as well as Minhag Ashkenazim. In today's kind of communities, people are coming from all over. It is a valuable thing to be familiar also with the Minhag Sfardim, Piskei Sfardim, etc. Let's move on. So here, someone asked me, he's on Shlichus in a small place, and he doesn't have company for Kiddush Levana. He's a married man, he has his wife, and so who else, when I at Kiddush Levana, turn around, or Yoim Aleichem Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, 3 times. Usually, in a Hamish community, you go out and the whole minyan is outside, and it's Shalom Aleichem to 3 different people. Here, he doesn't have another Jewish man to say Shalom Aleichem, and his wife is asking, is it okay to say Shalom to his wife? To say Shalom to his wife. So there is a concept of Ein Shoyalim B'Shloim Isho Klal. We have this from it's written in the Gemara. It's brought in Yoreh De'ah. One should not it's not tznius for a man to go out of his way to say Shalom to a woman, even through a shliach, even through a husband. It's considered a certain like an intrusion, in conflict with the concept of tznius. You can ask the husband how she is, but don't, however, whatever the details are. So there is something about giving shalom to Isha, to a woman. Now, actually, there's another lashon which I didn't do my homework properly. Lahaktim, not to be maktim shalom to Isha. And what we've seen by the Rebbe's style of writing, whenever the Rebbe writes to a woman, so the beginning of the letter, instead of shalom or bracha, it's bracha b'shalom. So there's a deliberate change, not to be makdim b'shalom, but to say first bracha and then shalom. Kolponim, this concept, there's actually, I found in doing a bit of research, a sefer all about Inyanim of Tznius. There's a whole chapter about the Inyan of shalom l'isha, but it certainly does not apply to one's own wife. It's not a problem to say shalom to one's own wife. That has to be shalom is obvious, yeah. But to say shalom, it's okay to say shalom, yeah. I once heard a diuk in our siddur. We have havos shalom she bein adam lachavei ishte bein adam lachavei bein ish leishtei. In other Sidurim, it's Havas Shalom Bein Odom L'Chavere. In others, it's She Bein Odom L'Chavere. So I once heard of Pshat that what's the difference? One is to bring harmony between husband and wife. The other one is there is a shalom. The shalom share bein odom l'chavei. There is a shalom there, but it seems to be a little bit hidden. So it needs some therapy to bring it out. So that's how havas shalom share bein odom l'chavei. Koponim. Let's come then in this context. So you have the Pischei Teshuva, which is I think worth reading. That's a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Chof Aleph in Even HaEzer. He quotes the Ritva, and he talks about this inyan of the Shem Shemayim, the way of behavior of tznius, one should behave in the Shem Shemayim. And so he quotes from the Ritva, Hakoil lefi das v'yiras Shemayim. Hakoil kefi ma she'omah ha'odom makir be'atzmo. You have to also be aware of your own inclinations, etc. If you feel that in makir be'atzmo she'yitzur nichna v'kofafloi, a person who feels that his drive is actually totally under control, ve'ein ma latino b'libei klal, and it's not going to stimulate any improper thoughts, etc. Mutar lo listakel or ledaber imo ervo v'lish'ol b'shloim eishesish. So it's okay for him to look and to speak, etc. And he quotes the story of Rabbi Yochanan who would sit by Shari Tvila, etc. And he brings a couple of stories where some of the Chachamei HaGemorah seem to behave in a way which would be not considered tzniustic nowadays. And he says that they were in such a level. There's a famous one who said that he has no thoughts, no improper thoughts because of that exposure. And he finishes off, of course, Ein roy lehokil bozeh elo lechosid gadol. Don't, to rely on this heter, say it doesn't really bother me. A person who's known to be a chosid gadol, but most of us should be concerned that it would be improper thoughts. Let's go on to the couple of chats here. Isn't there a story where the Rebbe didn't want to say if he was mafsik bin shel yad and shel rosh, the omish meirabo? There is. I didn't know about the Rebbe. I know that there is, and I've discussed this in the past. There is a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Mashpia in Vilna in around 1942. So this is during the Second World War. And Vilna at that time was still not under Nazi control. And he says something about not being mafsik between the Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, but it seems to be written in code. Because here you can see the Alter Rebbe clearly says you should be mafsik. And then there were later from Rav Greenglass, etc. There have been. I've got notes about this. There are those who said that you shouldn't be mafsik with Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, and they had the Frierdiker Rebbe. But I believe that was upon him. It seems to be that was in a particular. It was a conversation which meant more than just face value. Right. And the last one which we have on our list for tonight is about saying Shalom Aleichem in Kiddush Levana when there's no one else there. So I must share with you that when I was 40 years ago living in Crown Heights, it was the last night of Kiddush Levana. I lived on the 4th floor, top floor of this apartment building at the corner of Kingston and Montgomery. And I went onto the roof and I said Kiddush Levana. And then came to Shalom Aleichem. This is about 2 o'clock in the morning. Very low. I look down, and there's some bocher or a young man walking along Kingston Avenue going down, and I holler down, Shalom Aleichem, and no response. Again, and he looks up, and there's some Meshuggah at the top of the roof shouting Shalom Aleichem. There's Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, whatever. Okay, so now what do you do when you're on your own? Do you say Shalom Aleichem? So now we have this finally been published, the 4th volume, the 6th, whatever, the volume of Pischei Teshuvos on Chelik Daled of Mishnah Berurah. And there he says that you should say Shalom Aleichem even if you're on your own. But he's kind enough to give us his source, and that is the following sefer called Likutei Mahariach. The Mahariach is someone called Rabbi Yosef Chaim Friedman, and he published his sefer probably about 100 years ago, a little bit more perhaps. Very popular sefer, nice liquid, 3 volumes. Al Seder HaTfilah, Al Seder HaShulchan Aruch, Chaim. Very well-known sefer, and it's been, as you can see, it's been published. This has been newly retypeset. So I looked it up. Yeah, that's important when you have these malaktim. They do hard work, but they work swiftly, and sometimes they, they write things slightly different to the source. So now here he writes the following: the Nusach of the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch and the Or Zarua, that's Rabbi Yitzchak of Vienna, and of the Levush, is actually they have to say Sholom Olecho in the singular. The common Nusach is to say Sholom Aleichem in the plural, and that's also in the Matei Moshe, who was a Talmud of Marshal. And as we see also, yes, he says, if you're giving Sholom to 3 people, you say Sholom Aleichem. If you don't have 3 people, and you're saying 3 times Sholom to 1 man, you should say Sholom Alecho. And you see that's the Lashon of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. However, he says that the minig is even to a single person, you say Shalom Aleichem. And indeed, not only at Kiddush Levana, but generally when we greet someone, we use the plural Shalom Aleichem. Now that is probably influenced from the Yiddish. Perhaps Yiddish German. You know the word Teich. The word Yiddish Teich actually means Yiddish Deutsch, Jewish German, Judeo German. At any rate, so in the more respectful way, if someone you'd say instead of do, you'll say ear. You'll say the plural, and consequently, in Hebrew, when you'd say to a person, in a respectful way, you say Shalom Aleichem. Then he brings from the El Yorabo. The El Yorabo is a commentary on the Levush. And the El Yorabo quotes from the Arizal that the Kavona, by saying Shalom Aleichem, is to bring that there should be harmony between the sun and the moon. Now, as we know, at the beginning of creation, there was the complaint of the moon. You can't have 2 kings sharing the 1 crown. And then, as Hashem says, that's all right. Go ahead. The moon had to diminish herself. Now, and then in Kiddush Levana, we say there'll be a time, the moon will be the same as the sun, etc., etc. So then there will be a harmony in the Chambon de Levana. So the Arizal is saying that the Sholem Aleichem is alluding to peace between the sun and the moon. And therefore, it's okay to use the plural. So although the Pashtas, you're saying Shalom Aleichem to the man standing next to you, but it's okay to say Aleichem because it's also alluding to the sun and the moon. And indeed, the Al Yarabo quotes from the Arizal to say Shalom Aleichem. Okay. Now, with all due respect, he has not said here that if there's no one there, you still say Shalom Aleichem to the sun and the moon. That doesn't say it here. It's just saying that is kind of the behind the obvious of the Shalom Aleichem to the man in front of you, next to you. There's also the plural is referring to the Chambon Levana. All right. So, what do you do when you're mamish on your own? Now, if it's you don't do Kiddush Levana Friday night in any case, yeah, because it's Chutz L'Tchum. So you only do it on the weekdays. So pick up your phone and call up someone and say Shalom Aleichem over the phone. It's problem solved. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Right. If there's no one else to say Shalom to Kiddush Levana, and so this is the question. I find it strange. Okay. Is there some loophole about being able to say Kiddush Levana tonight That's a separate question, so we'll deal with that in a moment. Someone's pointing out in French also. You have the difference between tu and vous. Thank you. True. Right. Is it better to say Shalom Aleichem on the phone? I think yes, definitely. You can say Shalom Aleichem over the phone. That's not a problem. I think that would be a better solution than just standing there saying it to the Levana. Right. So just to finish up, Reb Gershon, you asked about saying Kiddush Levana after the mid of the month. So in these calendars, they have Sof Zman Kiddush Levana. However, there's a story which is written down by Rav Lando, Olav Shalom, Rabbi Yankov Lando, in the year Tov Reish Ayin Vov, possibly. Ayin Ches, I don't remember. It's in Rostov. It must be going. It's got it all written down, and how it was Pesach, and it was like the Rebbe Rasham did not want them to make Kiddush Levana the second night of Pesach. He says wait till Motzeh, and that was going to go the night going into Yud Ches. So I've written about this in the forthcoming Siddur. There's a whole article about that, but that I follow that when, for whatever, if let's say you weren't able to make Kiddush Levana last week, I'd say you could still make a bracha tonight. I wish you all a gute Woche, and can say also a guten Chodesh, and marbim b'simcha, and l'simchas olam al rosham till with Bias Moshiach tzidkeinu b'meheru yameinu mamash. Kol tov.
Good Woche.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Good Woche. Shkoyach.